The screams from the basement were just the beginning. I was diagnosed with an extremely aggressive brain cancer last week. My remaining time is no longer counted in years or months, but in days. Before I go, I want to confess everything. I want to atone for my sin, or at least lighten my conscience. I have lived with this for a part of my life, but now that my death is near, I can no longer keep this secret to myself. So listen carefully, for this is the confession of a dying man. What do you know about immortals? You will probably tell me that you have seen them on TV, in shows like Highlander, or in comic books or graphic novels. I used to think the same. To me, immortals were just Wolverine and company. They weren't real. I studied medicine to become a surgeon. You know that I am a plumber now, so it is obvious that I had to abandon my career before it even started for one reason or another. At the time, I was a young graduate, applying to hospitals across the country and even abroad. None of them responded favorably except for one located in the outskirts of Berlin, Germany. I had to leave my family and friends behind to pursue my career in a country whose language I did not even speak, but it was a rare opportunity to gain experience under professional surgeons. So I moved to Berlin, renting a tiny maid's room. There was no comfort at all, but I knew it was only temporary. Once I gained enough experience, I would return to France and secure a full-time position at a prestigious hospital in Paris. The first few months were difficult. The language barrier did not help. I tried to observe surgeries, took notes, asked questions in English, but almost no surgeon spoke the language. After a year of private lessons, I was finally able to understand German and hold conversations with my mentors. I perfected my training and eventually assisted in surgeries. I progressed at an incredible speed because there were so many operations each day. This hospital never ran out of patients. They came from all over the country and even from abroad. The reason? The hospital had a reputation for never running out of organs for transplants. Hearts, kidneys, lungs. I had no idea how they managed it, but they always found what they needed incredibly fast. I admit that certain thoughts crossed my mind, like organ trafficking in the city, but there was no proof. And above all, it was a golden opportunity for me to witness so many procedures firsthand. One night, I stayed at the hospital late, studying some books on transplants in Dr. Reinhardt's office, when I fell asleep with my face in the pages. To be fair, the doctor's chair was anything but uncomfortable. I was woken up by screams, a man's screams. That is normal in a hospital, you might say. But these were screams of agony. They were horrifying. I rushed out of the office and started searching for the source. I asked the nurse on duty, but according to her, no patient had screamed. I was heading back to the doctor's office when I heard them again. This time, I recognized where they came from. They were coming from behind a door leading to the hospital's basement. A large sign on the door read, "Kein Eintritt," no entry. Of course, I wanted to help whoever was suffering, but the door was locked. The screams stopped as soon as I fixed my gaze on it. That night, I went home. The next day, I immediately questioned Dr. Reinhardt about what was behind that door and why screams could be heard coming from there at night. A man who had always been kind and smiling suddenly showed a completely different side. Anger flashed in his eyes. Grabbing me by the collar, he slammed me against the wall and warned me that whatever was behind that door was none of my business. He threatened to fire me and ruin my career if I kept sticking my nose where it did not belong. I did not want to risk my future by getting fired from my very first job, so I put the matter aside for a few months. But one night, when I was on duty, I needed a stapler and remembered that there was one in Dr. Reinhardt's office. And of course, when I went to retrieve it, I heard the screams again. The exact same ones as before, which meant that whoever was suffering down there had been enduring it for months. I cared about my career. That was true, but I still had principles. I could not just leave that man there, suffering without doing something. I remembered that the doctor kept a set of keys in his office. I went back, grabbed them, and tried each one on the basement door. By some stroke of luck, one of them worked. I descended into the basement, trying to locate the source of the screams. I eventually arrived at another door, made of metal. Through the man's cries, I could hear two people speaking German. I hesitated for a long time outside that door. Then the screams stopped. I debated with myself for what felt like forever, but I finally stepped inside. It was an operating room. A man lay on the surgical table, his chest completely open. Standing over him were Dr. Reinhardt and the head nurse. In the doctor's hands was a human heart, freshly removed from the patient's torso. The doctor looked at me with wide eyes. He placed the heart into a cooler and removed his mask. I was terrified. My mind was racing to the worst possible conclusions. I was ready to run and alert the police. But the doctor asked me to wait, to hear him out. He promised that if I still wanted to report him after he explained everything, he would let me do it. I was against the idea, but something made me hesitate. The man whose heart had just been removed opened his eyes. I could not believe it. I even heard him whisper, "Helfen Sie mir! Ich flehe Sie an. Helfen Sie mir!" He was begging for help. I had no idea what was happening. Then Dr. Reinhardt told me everything. The man lying there was an immortal. They existed, but they preferred to remain hidden. If the world knew about them, they would become test subjects, exploited by science to uncover their secrets. But that was not why they had one locked away here. The doctor asked me how many lives had been saved at the hospital since I arrived. How many patients had received transplants just in time? The number was enormous, at least 30 times higher than other hospitals. That was their goal. Immortals were an unlimited source of organs. Every time one was removed, heart, liver, kidney, it grew back immediately. If an organ was taken too many times in succession, regrowth took longer. That was why they could not supply other hospitals and why everything had to remain a secret. For the good of the patients. They usually kept him sedated, but anesthesia stopped working during organ removal. The pain woke him up, and unfortunately, he had to endure every surgery while fully conscious. They avoided killing him to keep the organs in the best condition possible. Finally, the doctor asked me, "Are you ready to sacrifice all the men, women, and children waiting for an organ transplant just to save one person? One life against thousands. What do you choose?" The answer seems obvious, but trust me, when you are faced with the decision, it is not that simple. Let this man be tortured over and over again, or turn a blind eye and save thousands of people. I looked at the man one last time. I told him how sorry I was, then I left. The next day I resigned. I assured the doctor that I would keep my silence. Then I returned to France. I never practiced medicine again. This is my sin. Even if I did it to save as many lives as possible, knowing that a man has been suffering daily for 20 years is unbearable. His pleading eyes have haunted me ever since. But between you and me, what would you have done in my place?